as an opportunity. And that's one thing that is troubling, and we have to see what can be done about that. Because as a threat, it provokes anxiety, it provokes insecurity. And we have to ask ourselves, are strangers, are they really a threat for us, or are they an opportunity from which we can learn also to develop our own talents? And finally, maybe the most important threat nowadays, the most important and most dangerous weapon that each and everybody has in its pocket or in its purse could be this. Why? A smartphone. Because, of course, it provides the way to communicate, to get emails, to surf on internet. But at the same time, it can lead to misinformation. Oops. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yes. Oh, back. Wait a minute. Sorry. Do that. In that direction. Yes. No, that's too fast. No. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So, because, as I said, it can be a threat as well, because you can surf, you can receive mails, but also it can give bad information through the pitfalls of logarithms, conspiracy theories, etc., can be developed. And I provided some photos of examples of what could be the result of manipulation and conspiracy theories through mass media. We see here a couple of jihadist movements. We see Islamic State. We see what happened in Rwanda in '94. And as well we see the assault to the capital in the 6th January of 2028, where after the words of ex-President Trump, people marched to conquer the capital. So the threat is real. I'm trying to add on. Whoops. I have to point in what direction? Doesn't work anymore. Sorry. Batteries are up or what? Oh, yeah, now it's... Yeah. So I'm on my own now. So, I don't know if we can restart or... Okay. In the meantime, let me continue to talk about some forgotten crises here in Africa. I studied the situation in Eastern Congo, where I travel often. Also in yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let's go back one. Further one. Okay. Next one, please. Okay. There we are. Okay, and when we see some forgotten, thank you very much, some forgotten crises in Africa, which I studied, Eastern Congo, the situation in the Central African Republic, as well as in the Sahel region, what we experience, and it's already addressed here, that mainly these crises are provoked as part of a geostrategic interest and presence of valuable minerals, timber, of crops, or the Lebensraum. It's a German expression which means space to live, expansion space for people to live. And the paradox is that mostly the people, the population, are so poor because their country is so rich in minerals and all the other things. And sometimes that's what I saw on the field, that the diversity, the fact that people are different from different ethnies, from different ethnical groups, from different countries or religious, from different religions, is invoked as a scapegoat for military actions for people, attacking innocent, vulnerable populations, even as a part of the strategic battle between the different blocks of power, global power blocks in Occident, in the Western countries, United States, Russia, and China. And in that perspective also, religion is often used as a way to divide people instead of reunite people. And this within a philosophy of ancient as the Roman Empire, divide to reign, divide to rule. I try, but... Okay, so what we can see as a global response everywhere in the world, that I would resume that in 3 words. More and more in the Western states, in Europe, in the United States, we have the impression that we would like to build a wall, build that wall. The crisis of migrations, the crisis of people who would like to come to the Western world, etc., are used as scapegoats. We see how border controls are there. You see how the European Union makes contracts with states like Tunisia, Egypt, etc., to avoid that people are crossing the Mediterranean. We see in the Soviet Union crisis, Soviet Ukraine crisis, how globally every state is increasing their defense budget, where we have, as was said, prepare for the worst. There is an ideology where we are prepared mentality to this warfare. The NATO also, in his last address, farewell address, Jens Stoltenberg has said literally, the more weapons we send to Ukraine, the sooner we get peace, as if sending more weapons could produce more peace. And also, when we look at a moment at the Gaza-Israel war, we see how United States have double standards, where they preach a ceasefire, but at the same time, they send bombs with which the population is bombed. And also in relation with, the upcoming presidential elections, where this seems also an issue not to condemn what's happening over there. And towards Africa, I would say that in general, development aid is reduced. In several states, in Western states, they reduced the development aid towards Africa. So that's a vicious circle which could produce that more people are looking at a better future just in Europe. So that's not a very good answer, I would say. And selective answers also lead to geostrategical policy where own benefits are the most important thing. As a last element, that's concerning peacekeeping operations, the different UN, EAC, SEDEC operations seem to be very weak and do not produce a sustainable solution. Patrick gave the example of the MONUSCO operation in Congo, where after 25 years of operation, we never saw an improvement on the security, or better, the insecurity situation for the population, where still 6.7 million people are displaced internally. And these these operations seems cost inefficient without a long-term perspective. So I would like to present one photo which struck me, and to give this to illustrate this double standard. When we're talking about the Gaza crisis, you have to remember that the US recently delivered about 2,000 pound bombs to Israel in its war against Gaza. And in total, more than 50,000 metric tons of material equipment was shipped to Israel. To give you an impression of that, that is more than 500 cargo loads of a plane and more than 100 shiploads of military material just to conquer a surface of 365 square kilometers. When you compare that to the surface of Kenya, the Gaza Strip would fit in Kenya 1,600 times. So it's really an overkill with military equipment, as if with bombs, with weapons, etc., they would conquer, they would achieve their mission. And to illustrate that, I put also a photo of Nikki Haley. That's not Mrs. Nobody, but you know, she was a former governor of one of the states of the United States, and also UN ambassador for the United States with the UN, who wrote on one of these bombs, "Finish them." Finish them before these bombs were launched to Gaza. And we all know that these bombs didn't only kill Hamas militia, but already 42,000 innocent people, an overkill. And okay, I think that we have to take a moment to realize the cynicism of this expression, "finish them," and also remember that also in Africa there are a lot of forgotten crises where hundreds of thousands of people are losing their lives because of this proliferation of weapons, of military equipment. I couldn't finish without talking about what recently happened here in Kenya with that Gen Z rebellion, which is, and I was reading about it, where people telling about the Gen Z protest that could shift Kenya's power structure. Really, as an example of general, spontaneous, bottom-up, non-manipulated protests against that finance bill that was produced by your government. And it was really led by youngsters, by students, and I really think that it's an historical movement, an historical achievement, and really, I have to congratulate you, because it was really important, and it's rather unique in Africa, that in that way you could change some policy and an unjust law that would be passed. Nevertheless, I would remind you that there are some pitfalls in that, because you know it could be easily politically recovered, manipulated. Danger of misinformation, miscommunication is always there, and you know, through the mass media I mentioned already, and it could be one of the pitfalls is that it could be a short-term approach. A vision, and another element, the last element, is how do you cope with the violence that is needed, the collateral damage that is caused by such an operation. It's questions, pitfalls. So, to end, I would mention some points how we can go up towards a contribution for a peaceful transition towards more solidarity. As we said in the beginning, I think that the development of individual talents is an essential element both for personal well-being as well as for society, to build well our new society. And unfortunately, we see that political leaders are sometimes not even interested to create, to develop these individual talents. They like more obedience. They do not like opposition, as you saw as well. They see people more as another brick in the wall than as a piece of this enormous jigsaw puzzle, each and every one with its unique talents. So, and they can create out of that polarizations, a proposition of fear, as if it's we against they, where they use often also strangers as these scapegoats, as I saw. And in that way, it's most important that a solid civil society organization structure is created, is needed, as a watchdog to see, to look upon the actions of the political leaders, as a counterbalance, but also because these organizations are rooted really within the problems, within the daily problems of the communities, and where they can collaborate with authorities, if possible, or protest against them in a legal way. As a golden rule in civil society organization, we often say that try to govern as much as possible with them and not without them. So that's a solution. Okay? So because of the different pitfalls I mentioned, also in the Kenyan case, I think we need a more or less long-term vision, shared as much as possible by the different branches, by the different organizations of this CSO, civil society organization platform. Because action, on the one hand, action without a clear, shared, long-time perspective seems to be blind, and could also be easily manipulated by leaders, by political leaders. On the other hand, when you only pray for peace, I don't think you get peace. So it has to be combined. And there, I think that some religious-based organizations can come in and can add some value to the overall picture and the overall perspective for the civil society organizations. And they could, by interaction, by reinforcement, by never-ending the cycle of reflection, action, action, reflection, I think we can present this broader picture and we can develop together a long-term vision on that. For that, it's very important that people speak, that people see each other, they exchange their views, and they discuss how they see what is their opinion, how they can use their unique values and talents to contribute towards a new open society. And we see often that political leaders are a little bit reluctant to that. You know, I've saw that in the Great Lake region at several points, where political leaders do not like meetings like this, where people from different countries, from different cultures meet, exchange, and try to see what is their perspective, what is their dreams, what are their possibilities to contribute to a more solidary and open and peaceful society. And as I said, I try to give a picture on the global situation, but these principles, they count at every level, at the national, international level, as well as, I think, in the regional level, on the regional level, as well as in the communitarian level, where the same principles count, where people meet, when people have an open-minded discussion on how they can contribute to a more peaceful society, as a community, as a village, as a region. I think we can head forward. And of course, that's it on a lower level, on a micro level, these initiatives are more vulnerable. That's clear, because they can be frustrated by higher levels, by political manipulation, by military action or physical action, etc. But nevertheless, I think it's worthwhile to try, and from this grassroots approach, and this methodology from bottom up, I think we can achieve a more better world. So, okay, let's hope that. So let's hope that we can create together a more peaceful society. And I think being here at St. Paul's University, I think, and before we spoke about the cradle of humanity, here in Africa, I think you can be a laboratorium where you can experiment, where you can exchange ideas with each other, agreeing or not agreeing, but anyway, trying, first of all, to develop your own talents as well as other talents in order to contribute to a new society, to a more open society, a more solidar society where the unique piece of that enormous jigsaw puzzle, what I thought about, can be developed, and where we can see more and more our destination towards a more harmonious society. I thank you very much for your attention. Was in time? Well, did very well.
Thank you very much. Let us appreciate him once more. He even ends with Amani, and he looks nice. Oh, I thought that was part of his presentation. But that is actually good, because it also leads into our next presentation, which is going to look from where he left into more practical ways. I heard from the beginning that almost everybody was asking, what is the government doing? What is that other group doing? But now we want to know, what role can you play? And to bring us into hearing how to be part of the solution, a community-based security initiative, we would like to welcome a security specialist, Professor Macharia Munene, who is going to speak to us and open our eyes and see areas that we can engage and be part of this discussion about thinking or rethinking about security in Africa outside the box. Karibu. Let's appreciate him as he comes.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, what turns out to be the oldest university in Kenya, if not East Africa. And I'll try to address a few things. And see how far we go. The term security is broad, both in theory and in the application. And it operates in the context of society. Therefore, it is a social concept. And it can be applied to individuals or collectively. It is therefore a product of general agreement amongst people as to whether they will live together in order to protect their perceived interest. Because if they don't agree, then they keep on fighting. And that general agreement is usually what we call a constitution and nothing else. And the assumption is that everybody will live within that agreement and they will agree to be civil to each other. And that's where we get the word civilization, organized living. to be civil to each other as a way. It is not possible, therefore, for one to be secure in isolation. Therefore, security is a community affair. It implies making people or geopolitical entities feel safe where they are and to feel comfortable doing whatever it is that makes them feel fulfilled. There are some negative aspects. The security is actually preventative in the sense that it stops some people from doing bad things to others or what they think is supposed to be done. It also implies freedom. Freedom to do what is right without fear of adverse repercussions. Loss of fear instills confidence in individuals and communities, and that can be said to be a prerequisite for progress. Security implies making progress in the context of the community. It is then to have peace. And peace is not a given. It is a contrived reality. It does not exist in itself. So people have to work at peace. There may be said to be two types of peace. The peace of the rulers, so it's the usual talk about maintaining the peace. And then there is the generic peace, the one that affects everybody and feels comfortable. When you look at Africa today, we may say there are about 4 types of threats that have the effect of debordering states. We operate in the context of states. But there are these threats. One of them has been alluded to by the previous speaker. It is the cyber threat. It is so pervasive that no country can claim to be secure from cyber threats. And the African countries are even less secure than the others, which are spending billions and billions of dollars into cyber research. The other is environmental disaster. It cuts across countries. And so we have countries that many don't know what to do. Even if they try to do something, they have a problem. I think IGAD is one of those attempts to do something initially. The third is loss of trust. It's pervasive. Institutions have lost trust. Governments have lost trust. Even religious organizations have lost trust. Confidence has disappeared. And that has made society insecure. We don't know who to trust anymore. So that's a threat. And of course we have pandemics. And pandemics are known as to origins. Sometimes after the fact we say we think we know where they came from. But we don't know where the next one is coming from. And they cut across the entire world. And it turns out that when they come, African states are the most affected in these sort of things. Now I'd like to touch base on sources of insecurity and war at 2 levels, at the international and the local level. At the international level, we have desire to impose one's values and ways on others. When that happens, the other side resists, tries to resist. There is a feeling of exclusivity, whether religious, racial, or ethnic. We have in Europe and the US, I think Kaplan talked about the US being a garden and the rest of the world being a jungle. Then Joseph Borrell of the European Union talked of Europe being a garden and the rest being a jungle. And the idea was to keep the jungle from the garden. And you can imagine where the Africans are in the jungle to be kept out. There is greed. Sorry, before I get to greed. Monopolization of and claims to virtues. The idea that one people are more virtuous than others, and therefore only they should count. Fear of what others might do to you, whether they will or not is another matter. And that fear has been known to do a lot of damage. And one of the better examples was the Roman obsession with Carthage. Simply because it existed, it had to be destroyed. And we see almost the same thing now. Simply because Russia exists, the US feels that it is not safe because Russia exists. And belief that international anarchy is the order. And if that is the case, every country should prepare on its own how to deal with the others in an anarchical way. And they call themselves the realists. Before they do unto you, you do unto them. Now, at the local level, the national level, we have failure in leadership. For the topic given there, finding initiatives, implies there is failure in the system. And why is this failure? There is persistent sense of fear in the country, right now in Kenya, which cannot be properly explained, but it is there. Failure to adhere to agreed norms of fairness and what is just. So there is lack of justice and belief that the country is being fair. There is a lot of greed which appears to propel incompetence, corruption, and bad policies. So when you have bad policies all over, you generate commotions. There's loss of confidence in institutions, in leadership, whether it is political, religious, or civil. There is loss of confidence. Question is how to restore that. Then we have breakdown in law and order. And since there is breakdown in law and order, it leads to desperation. And that desperation sometimes tends to give credence or to excuse the rise of vigilante groups and militias, who then assume the role that the government should be performing. It's a tragedy in itself. So the role of government. It is necessary to have government. One may agree with St. Augustine that governments, whether you like them or not, are a necessity where people are organized. And of course, with that is a question of legitimate power use. The arguments for restraining bad behavior, knowing that there are people in society who are prone to doing the wrong thing, knowing they are doing the wrong thing. It's one thing to do the wrong thing out of ignorance, but knowing that you are doing the wrong thing, they are there. So governments, in theory, are there to help restrain those people. And of course, the just war argument, it would be criminal to watch somebody killing another one and you do nothing about it. So government should be there to provide for the welfare of those in that given place. This includes food security, ability to respond to calamities effectively without excuses, to protect sovereignty and the perceived national interest against external aggression. It is a tragedy when a country appears to have surrendered its sovereignty and to have dictations from outside. It does not decide itself. To maintain law and order as per agreement, but it should not become the source. The government should not be the source of disorder. Unfortunately, we have instances where the government is the source of the disorder. It is to balance between individual and collective interests, wishes, as per the agreement. The government has that role. To maintain a sense of general peace. And as we agreed, peace is a contrived reality. It does not exist. So people have to work at it repeatedly. Now, what suggestions do we make as to what should be done? There's an assumption, as we say, that society has broken down. The community is not guided properly and requires fresh thinking, different ways. They may be right or wrong, but some thinking is required. In order to create a sense of security and a sense of peace. One, you need to create an environment of common sense. In many instances, people don't use common sense. So that it prevails and then subordinates individual wishes and greed to the common will. It is an attitude issue. One of the mind to agree to be civil to others and be fair. That which you not want done unto you, you should not do it unto others. To develop a questioning mind, critical thinking, everywhere and in everything. So people who are docile and do not question are living in very dangerous times and places. Dictators do not like people who ask questions. And so they like ignorance. So to counter that, people should develop ability to question everything and anything that happens. I like the comments that were made about the Gen Zs. They raise questions. And then they were sabotaged somewhere along the way. There's need to have people who command authority. That is, people who have respect of people. Now, when I talk about authority, not somebody who has statutory power. Because people who have statutory power sometimes abuse it and think that they are, in fact, they abuse most of the time. But somebody with authority is that person who is believed and trusted because he or she is the one, not because of the position he or she holds. So if so-and-so said it, people follow. And we hope that that person that rises that way, who has that authority, is then a good person and direct people. Unfortunately, sometimes demagogues arise in the process. And we need to find a way of stopping demagogues. And these arise because constituted authority has failed. These sometimes become governments unto their own, in competition with existing governments. Yeah? We have a good example of Haiti. Yeah? Yes. And Kenyans have gone there to try and see whether they can do something. When that happens, peace does not exist. We have tried a few things in Kenya. We have an organ which came out of the mess we found ourselves in 2007, the electoral crisis. We killed each other, we did all those things. And then out of it came the NCIC, which Sam Korbia leads. It tries to anticipate, but it could be a little more effective than it is. I don't know whether it's the resources or whatever it is, but it's an attempt to do that. There were attempts, something called Nyumba Kumi. It's become a routine, a formality, as opposed to being something people believe in and act on. There have been efforts, outreach, dialogue, campaigns, in order to seek and sort out what's the difference, why are we quarreling? And people, right now in Tana River, there is a mess. So why are they? And it's not enough to come up with routine answers. Oh, they are grazing, or they are doing this. Sometimes it turns out that there's thugs in charge of them. So why? You need to reduce dependency, particularly in finance and opinions. One of the challenges in Africa, many of us, is that we are too dependent. Even things we can do for ourselves, we are still dependent. Which means even thinking is dependent. And when you are dependent in thinking, right, somebody will not think always right for you. You end up in a mess. So to develop capacity to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, in mind as well as in deed, is something that we should aspire to. It does not mean that you ignore other people, you interact with them, because they have things they can say. But to be dependent is terrible. We have instances where people go to negotiate things, and our negotiators are totally ignorant of their own interest, their own country, and the people they are negotiating with. So we keep on being shortchanged, and you wonder why. So can we develop that capacity to be critical thinkers and to know the interest? We have to pay attention to the kind of training and exposure that our officials get, whether it's our uniformed people, whether it is the policy-making people. Sometimes you wonder whether they're getting the right exposure. And do they end up getting the right type of knowledge? knowledge of the self, knowledge of the other, and knowledge of the convergence points where you agree, or points of divergence where you disagree, and knowing them so that you can disagree or agree. And it appears as if we have a shortage of those three types of knowledge among our negotiators. So too many policymakers in Africa display ignorance of their own interest, the interest of their own countries, and therefore are not able to defend or promote the welfare of their places. They are not able to secure their societies or their countries. Instead, they surrender things. Of course, their pockets become very fat, but the country goes down the drain in the process. So as I wind up, let me just say that as much as possible, try to avoid what has been called the tragedy of the common, because it's common to everybody and it's everybody's business. Therefore, it is nobody's business. Nobody does anything, because it is everybody's. So instead of engaging in the tragedy of the commons, we make the commons the affair of everybody, so that you do something. If something is going wrong, you say it, and try to find out or to offer solutions or ways out as to what can be done. I think if we try some of those things, we might make some progress. But most important, keep on asking questions to everybody and anybody. So that is my small presentation. As I just said something, there was a man called Bishop John Jenga. Some of you know him, eh? John Jenga, I used to work for him a little bit. And he once told me that don't try to say a lot of big things, to teach a lot of things. Just teach the little that you know. So I just say the little that I know, nothing else.
Let's appreciate Prof there. If that is what you call small or a little, then your much must be really much. Allow me to appreciate that presentation together with the other one. We heard from our professor of theology and development. They have actually done us proud in many areas in terms of engaging us and just tickling us so that we can be able to imagine. And I have written a number of things down from both of them. I believe you have also written down. But I would like us to hear another presenter before we go on to ask a number of questions. I'll give a number of minutes for us to interact, but I want to give this time to Professor Esther Mombo. Earlier on, I was having a conversation with her, and she was asking me, did you get the right title? And I said, I know all your titles. And of course, she meant a different kind of title. I meant a different one. And I meant that I know all her names and I know who she is, because she's been a professor here for many years. She was also my professor a number of years ago. Can I tell you how many years? Yes, that is many years ago. When I started doing theology, she was my professor close to 32 years ago. And eventually, for the last 20-something years, we are now doing it together. I think she must have done a good job. Karibu, karibu. And she has many secrets. She is always sharp in mind, in dressing.
I don't know who he's talking about. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak and also to be the last of the speakers in the morning. I don't know whether that was by design or whatever, but having had a prophet earlier, maybe it was prophetic. Thank you for the opportunity again, and thank you all the ones who have spoken before me. And the joy of speaking last, you can easily say all that have been said, I agree. But before I agree, let me also add my voice. I've entitled my talk as The Cries of the Broken Need Justice, Not Weapons, an intersectional approach in breaking the cycle and the boxes of violence in Africa. Distinguished guests, friends, and fellow advocates for justice, I'm grateful to the organizers of the conference for allowing me to add my voice on the topic Out of the Box, Rethinking African Security, Rethinking African Security, boosting or to boost peace and security in Africa beyond violence-based reactions. I thought we have moved away from thinking out of the box. I thought the Gen Zs have told us you run away from the box and you think far away from the box, whichever is playing with words. Violence takes many forms. It is pervasive, we know that, and it leaves indelible scars on individuals and communities, as many have witnessed too. Peacekeeping forces are also in plenty, especially in our continent. However, we are not here merely to recount the pain in the context of peacekeeping agents or in the context of invasion, but we are here to engage in a way that we formulate aspects of healing and transformation. So I invite you this afternoon to engage with me in this out-of-box rethinking Africa security through an intersectional lens. What was in the program, holistic approach, guided by the profound insights of African women, theologians, and being one of them, whose voices challenge us to break the cycles of violence and move beyond the limiting boxes that define and perpetuate violence. It is Nelson Mandela who said once that we can't just pull people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they are falling in the river. A poem that is accredited to Mercy Oduyoye and has been rewritten by Owino, a student in Kenya. In this poem, which she talks about remembering me, she says, violence walks our streets. Violence lives in our homes. Violence of bodies thrown out, violence thrown of bodies of our daughters in the dump sites and empty quarries. Violence hidden behind hallowed words of pulpits in churches and mosques. Violence is likened and appreciated in memes and trends in social media, and in shadows it hides its face. But we, the daughters of Africa, know it lurks in the fabric of our homes, in the silence of our mothers' cries. We have borne the weight of history, of scars unseen, of wounds unspoken. Yet the drums of liberation echo in our hearts, for we are not victims of fate, we are the weavers of a new dawn. Who will listen when we speak? The cries of the broken do not need weapons but justice. For in justice we find our peace, in liberation our voice. We rise not with fists but with hands that heal, with words that mend the fractured world. For violence will not be our inheritance, but love, justice, and the power of change. The quotes that I have done from Nelson Mandela and from the rewritten of Mercy Oduyoye highlights the facts that violence is systemic, and in order to address it, we must get the root causes rather than merely reacting to the consequences. On the other hand, the poem in honor of Mercy work captures the African women theologians' view that violence is complex. It is manifested in various ways and impacts individuals and societies and operates within various systems. If underscored, the fact that violence is not a singular phenomenon, but takes many forms: physical, emotional, structural, cultural, name them. These ideas are in line with the Silencing the Gun by 2020 flagship initiative of the African Union, and it has been mentioned here, Agenda 2063. Although the 2020 target was missed, it is worth noting that this flagship initiative took an intersectional framing of what violence is and how pathways towards a safe and violence-free Africa needs to take an intersectional approach as well. Thus, the flagship initiatives of the African Union, Agenda 2063, aspires to end all wars, conflicts, and gender-based violence, and to prevent genocide. In this presentation, therefore, I use this framework to cast a spotlight on some of the interesting ideas from the theme of meeting that is out of the box, Rethinking Africa, Security Beyond Violence-Based Military Reactions. The two things that struck my attention as I thought about this conference is out of the box and rethinking. In my reflection, I'll pay more attention to the so-called boxes and how they enable violence in numerous ways. I will then attempt to unpack the concept of rethinking in regards to Africa security by paying attention to the work and wisdom of our mothers and grandmothers and some African women who utilize their own lived experiences and their lived faith and religion to produce new logic and alternative pathways of not only a violence-free Africa, but violence-free homes, churches, schools, mosques, hospitals, streets, and offices. Traditional security frameworks exhibit several significant limitations that hinder a comprehensive understanding of security issues. One major concern is the male-centric focus prevalent in the peace and peacemaking spaces and activities. These often prioritize male experiences and viewpoints. The dominance skews the understanding of security dynamics, neglecting how gender roles shape these issues and marginalize women's contributions to conflict resolution, peacemaking, and community safety. Traditional frameworks adopt a state-centric approach that prioritizes national security over individual welfare. This narrow focus on military capabilities and interstate relations often sideline critical issues such as human rights and social justice. It is the voices of African women that have not been listened to or captured on issues of security and peacekeeping. In the images of war and violence, if you think of what is going on in the coast now for those that are Kenyans, when you look at the images, you see women and children running away, carrying luggage, not knowing where they are going. It is women and children who in the end become the battleground where there is war. Women in Liberia taught us that war, by challenging war, by coming out in protest in great numbers and forcing the peacekeepers and the peace negotiators to sign peace deal before they came out of a building. So what boxes do I name? To begin with, we must ask, what does it mean to take an intersectional approach? To violence and insecurity in Africa. Intersectionality as a concept first was articulated by the legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. It refers to ways different forms of oppression, whether based on race, gender, class, or other factors. They intersect and interact to create unique experiences of marginalization. In Africa, violence is not a one-dimensional issue. It exists at the intersection of race, gender, colonial history, economic disparity, and cultural norms. Further, as we address violence, we must recognize that it affects people differently depending on their social location. Isabel Piri, one of the theologians, observes that violence in all its forms disproportionately affects women. She notes that women in Africa continue to suffer the brunt of violence from war, domestic abuse, and harmful cultural practices. She argues that theology must take a stand against these injustices by lifting the voices of the oppressed and advocating for their full humanity. Musimbi Kanyoro, a Kenyan, further highlights that violence is a reality that cuts across socio-economic and religious boundaries in Africa. It is in the church, in the community, and in the home. So the gospel must confront this with a message of liberation for all God's people, particularly women. As we hold this conference in war-torn areas that have been mentioned, like DRC and other places, women and children continue to suffer sexual and gender-based violence while running away from war, in the presence and or by peacekeepers, and in trying to feed their families by fetching firewood. It is the likes of Nobel Peace Prize Denis Mukwege, a gynecologist, who spends time in Panzi Hospital reconstructing women's bodies who have been sexually violated. Statistics show that 48 women are raped every hour in the context of war. Based on some of these facts, I raise 3 boxes that we must cast out spotlight on. One is religion and cultural software for violence. 2 is the racialization of discourse around war and peace. And 3 is the masculinization and the militarization of peace initiatives. Religion and cultural software for violence. In a continent where a large percentage talks about a religious belief or a religious act, whether you are talking about African traditional religion, Islam, Christianity, etc., we cannot avoid talking about religion. In Liberia, when the women were protesting against war in their country, their slogan was, "Pray the devil out." And prayer was not just silence and singing in the church. prayer meant protests against the atrocities that were committed on them. So the term religious and cultural software refers to the underlying beliefs and values, norms and practices that shape how society or community understands and responds to violence. In the African context, both religious and cultural frameworks deeply influence perceptions and actions regarding violence. This software is engraved in the fabric of social institutions, belief systems, rituals, and customs. It often becomes internalized and guides how people justify, resist, or perpetuate violence. Religion as a double-edged sword. In the African context, religion, both Christianity, Islam, and others, as well as traditional religion, plays a complex role in relation to violence. It can either justify violence or be a powerful tool for peacemaking. At times, there is a sense of ignoring religion in terms of development. But in this continent, it is hard to ignore religion. It is important that religion is interrogated rather than being ignored. Patriarchal structures deeply embedded in many African cultures perpetuate the subordination of women and justify violence against them, such as domestic violence, sexual harassment, and harmful traditional practices in the presence even of peacekeeping forces. So religious silence and complicity is significant in terms of the ways in which leaders and institutions remain silent at critical issues of violence. Religious institutions may also be implicitly in supporting violence by failing to condemn harmful practices, focusing instead on maintaining social order or aligning with powerful political leaders. Some will talk about peace-loving or peacemaking. How does that reflect in the context of violence? So religion and culture is a box, is a software that cannot be denied when dealing with issues of violence. Racialization and of discourse around war, security, and peace, the second box. Racialization refers to the process by which certain groups are categorized, marginalized, or framed through a racial lens, influencing how war and peace are understood and discussed. In the context of war and peace, racialization shapes how conflicts are portrayed, who is deemed violent or peaceful, and whose suffering is prioritized or ignored. At times, when we look at our newspapers or our TV screens, you find there is a war next door, next country, but the war that you are seeing is the one that is far away. So racialized narratives of war and peace often perpetuate stereotypes about non-Western, non-white populations, framing them as inherently violent or need of salvation and intervention by Western powers. Conflict in Africa are often racialized in global media and political and religious discourses, with Africa depicted as inherently violent, unstable, and primitive. The idea of the white savior mentality emerges a lot in peace-building efforts, where Western actors are seen as the primary agents of peace, or they provide peacekeeping forces or support African peacekeepers to go to another country to support. This reinforces racial hierarchies, positioning Western interventions as superior to local solutions. Some of these interventions lay a great overemphasis on military solution, equating security with military strength, while overlooking non-military factors that contribute to insecurity. Simplistic definitions of security, these issues as mainstream theories tend to reduce security into the preservation of national borders and military might, ignoring the complexities of human experience that encompass economic, social, and psychological dimensions. The racialization of discourses around war and peace perpetuates harmful stereotypes and deepens global inequalities. By understanding how race shapes perceptions of conflict and international responses, we can work towards more just, inclusive, and decolonized narratives that promote genuine peace and justice for all population, regardless of race or region. Box number 3, masculinization and militarization of peace initiatives. Masculinization refers to the dominance of masculine ideas, values, and practices in shaping peace and security frameworks. It promotes attributes like aggression, control, strength, and dominance, often sidelining more collaborative or relational approaches to peace. Sometimes peacekeeping means sharing the powers or dividing the leadership or the loot, as I may call it, making every group happy without looking at the justice issues in that particular spot. While it is true that women have been included in the negotiations of peace, it is also true that these voices haven't been heard. There is still a lot of tokenism on the table of negotiating peace. Masculinization perpetuates the idea that men are naturally suited for leadership in peace and security matters because of their association with strength, rationality, and control, while women are seen as too emotional or weak to handle such high-stake negotiations. Peace initiatives that are masculinized often reinforce existing patriarchal structures as they focus on elite male leaders or armed groups, while ignoring the voices and needs of women, children, and marginalized groups affected by conflict. Militarization involves incorporation of military strategies, structures, and mindsets into peace initiatives, where peace is often pursued through force or threats or violence rather than dialogue and negotiation. Many international peacekeeping missions have become militarized, where peacekeepers are armed and trained in combat strategies. This can lead to a focus on maintaining order through force rather than fostering dialogue, healing, or community reconciliation. Together, these trends reinforce the idea that security and peace can only be achieved through military strength and male-dominated approaches. So what do I propose in terms of suggestions? Violence in Africa cannot be isolated from the interconnected forces of race, gender, colonial history, and economic disparity. And my former speakers have alluded to that. These actions overlap to create unique and often severe forms of violence. Addressing violence requires an intersectional approach that accounts to these complexities, recognizing that solutions must engage with multiple players of oppression simultaneously to achieve justice and peace for all. African women theologians have been at the forefront of this intersectional analysis. Their work shows us that violence must be understood not only in terms of physical aggression or warfare, but also in its structural, cultural, systemic, and religious dimensions. They remind us that patriarchal violence, for example, is connected to economic violence, to colonial legacies, and to exploitation of African resources. In conclusion, therefore, I want to say, what lessons do we learn? First is that violence must be understood in all its dimensions: physical, emotional, structural, and systemic. Second, we cannot address one form of violence without addressing the others. An intersectional approach means understanding how violence impacts people differently depending on their gender, class, ethnicity, and other social factors. Secondly, is that peace is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of justice. We must create systems that are just and equitable, where violence has no place because everyone's dignity is respected. Third is that the role of religion and other cultural institutions are a critical player on issues of violence. We must move from being complacent in systems of violence to being prophetic voices that challenge injustice and support the liberation of all people, particularly those who are marginalized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mombo, for a very thought-provoking presentation, and particularly bringing in the other dimension of gender. And it was by design that we put it there, and eventually I think it has been delivered well to challenge all of us that there could be places that we forget. And if you remember in the morning, we talked about the story of the wheelbarrow. And if you remember, the concentration was in one area while the big thing was happening somewhere else. The effects of war, the effects of the insecurity affect some people sometimes more than others. And they carry and bear the burden. And it is not fair for us to leave them behind. I remember organizing another engagement like this, and this time we even invited children and the youth. And their voices were actually something that would make you cry, because they also have perspectives. And every time something blasts, they think differently. They cannot concentrate in schools. They cannot even study well. They cannot achieve the dreams that they have because of the insecurity that has been caused. I think this morning we have been richly blessed, if I may say that, because of all the presentations that we've had. I want us to do a number of things. I want us, first of all, I know we have been having many questions, and therefore this is the time for us to hear the questions. And like I said in the morning, I would like you to direct the question to a particular speaker. Those are still here. One is doubling up as an interpreter, but he is still here. He opened for us, and we didn't know that he was blessed in many ways. So he is doing a wonderful job. There is a part of us who understand French better than English, and for that reason, we have had two of them assisting, and now the positions have shifted again, and he has taken his position. That was quite fast. Please line up your questions. I would like to encourage you to take only one question so that we can take as many as possible. Where is the mic, and who is assisting us? James, please assist us. Anybody with a question? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We will take those 5 first of all, and then we will take another round after those ones. So let's begin there. We'll begin there and then end this other direction. Just make it quick, brief, so that we can hear as many as possible.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Kelvin Vundi. I'm a student here of Peace and Conflict Studies, and I would like to direct my question to Professor Mombo. First of all, I want to say that I've been You made a very nice presentation, and I was glued into it that so much, and that was lovely. You spoke about gender issues in conflict, and you've mentioned that women and children are the most that suffer in conflict, and also the UN women's statistics that 48 women in every hour in Congo face sexual abuse. My question to you is that, do you think, or do you agree that having more women in leadership position will help solve the cases of conflict or promote peace and security in Africa or in the world today? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's hear, there was another one there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Alfred Nyamu, also a student from the Peace and Conflict Studies. I wish first to appreciate the organizers of this conference, because apparently it is very timely, and that there's something particular interesting to me. And I wish to ask a question regarding what has been mentioned by a number of presenters, and that is concerning the anti-government protests that have been there in Kenya. And when you think about it, you think about the grievances that were being addressed by the so-called Gen Zs. And what comes to my mind is that there are human security issues that were in question. And such protests were also in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Mali. And therefore, these are concerns that are not just a case in Kenya, but something that has been happening in Africa. And that is why we are talking about rethinking security in Africa. Going direct to my question, I wish to direct my question to Patrick. And him coming from the African Union, we have seen governments or regimes that do not want to address issues that the citizens maybe are concerned about. Do we have a framework in the African Union concerning policies or binding agreements that can direct governments and regimes to address issues of concerns to their citizens? Or can we foresee such a situation in times in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you. We now come to this other side. We want to hear the other three questions.
Merci. Je vais parler en français et j'aurai besoin d'une traduction. Mon nom est Laurien Nezimana.
I'm Laurien Lizimana.
Je suis le directeur pédagogique de l'Université de paix en Afrique.
I'm the pedagogical director of the University for Peace in Africa.
Ma question s'adresse à Marty,
My question is to Marty Waltz,
mais elle a été provoquée par le professeur Machari.
but it was provoked by Professor Machari.
Parce que Marty a parlé de nos smartphones,
Marty spoke about our phones,
en disant qu'ils répandent aussi les théories du complot. Ils répandent les théories du complot.
Yes, because they will also spread conspiracy theories.
Et je voulais demander au professeur Marty s'il a eu connaissance d'une position sur ces théories du complot.
And I want to ask him whether he is aware of any position regarding conspiracy theories
Qui dit que les théories ou la théorie du complot est elle-même un complot.
Is he aware of anybody saying that the conspiracy theory is in itself a conspiracy?
Parce que justement, c'est une manière d'empêcher les gens de penser de façon critique.
Because it is a way of preventing people from thinking critically.
ce que disait le professeur Machari.
what Professor Machali mentioned as a need.
Parce que la pensée critique essaye de enlever le voile.
Critical thinking takes away the veil
Parce que l'essentiel est toujours voilé.
because
L'essentiel,
the essential parts are supposed to be somehow unclear and veiled.
les véritables causes de notre marasme sont toujours voilées.
The real causes of our difficulties are always veiled and not seen.
Et lorsque vous enlevez le voile
When you take away that veil
et que vous montrez la cause qui est cachée,
and you show the cause that has been hidden previously,
on vous dit tout de suite que vous êtes conspirationniste.
you will be told to be a conspiracy believer.
Et au lieu de regarder le complot que vous désignez,
And
c'est vous qu'on va regarder.
And instead of addressing the conspiracy that you are pointing to, you will be the target.
Et on va vous faire taire
And you will be silenced.
en vous accusant d'être complotiste.
And you will be accused of being a conspiracy theoretician.
Ça, c'est une chose. La seconde chose qui est liée à cela,
This is the first one. The second one, which is in connection,
c'est le rôle de ce qu'on appelle les GAFAM. Les GAFAM. Les GAFAM, elle me demande ce que c'est, elle ne sait pas.
I
C'est
don't know what it is, so
c'est
I'm asking.
Google, Amazon,
Ah,
Facebook, Apple
okay.
and
These-
Microsoft.
these, Silicon Valley giants.
Voilà, les géants de la communication qui passent par là
Okay.
et qui disposent de ce qu'on appelle les algorithmes.
So, yeah, can you say au début de la question, comme ça je prends toute la question.
Donc, je disais que la question que je posais était liée au rôle des GAFAM,
Which is the role of these Silicon Valley giants
qui ont des algorithmes
who have these algorithms
qui vont vous traiter de complotistes
which will treat you as conspiracy believers
quand ils vont voir que vous allez dans la bonne direction
if they see you going in the right direction,
pour désigner les véritables causes de nos difficultés.
to point to the real causes of our difficulties.
Voilà, je vais arrêter là. Merci.
We had two more. Just make them short, please, so that.
Je m'appelle Christian, je viens de la RDC.
I'm
J'ai-
Christian from Democratic Republic of Congo.
Je voudrais poser une question qui est en lien, en fait, un cheval entre Madame Esther et prof, je crois, qui l'a précédé.
So I would like to address my questions to Professor Esther and Professor Machari.
En fait, prof Esther nous a beaucoup marqué positivement. Ça ne sert à rien d'aller sauver une personne qui est entrée, en fait, de se noyer dans une rivière, mais il faut aller plutôt chercher la cause à la source de la rivière.
You have well explained that it is not enough to save a person drowning, but you have to go to the cause. Why is she or he in the river in the first place?
Alors, les liens, c'est quoi? C'est que Madame a privilégié l'approche de résolution des conflits, des solutions aux violences, de manière non militaire, dans une approche non militaire.
She has privileged an approach that is non-violent and non-military.
Et je pense aussi, les précédents ont parlé de dialogue, en partageant l'expérience du Kenya, en parlant de dialogue, en parlant de 10 maisons, tous ces mécanismes qui sont mis au niveau de la base.
And the predecessor has also spoken about dialogue and coming together to speak.
Mais je voudrais poser une question, celle de savoir, nous avons vu dans plusieurs pays, notamment en RDC, des dialogues qui se déroulent, des dialogues qui sont organisés, mais dont les résolutions ne sont pas respectées.
We have seen in DRC various dialogues being organized, but then the solutions that were elaborated have not been respected.
Voilà, je veux savoir quelle est en fait la bonne approche pour faire respecter les accords entre les parties en conflit.
What is the right approach to guarantee that the agreements are respected?
Je vais finir avec Madame Esther. Vous avez dit qu'il faut valoriser les institutions traditionnelles, mais aujourd'hui la société elle est dynamique. Nous sommes déjà à une grande vitesse par rapport à l'évolution, par rapport à la modernité. Est-ce qu'il est encore possible de valoriser les institutions traditionnelles? Merci.
You have said we need to put to value the traditional institutions, but modernization has a great speed. So is it still possible to put to value these traditional institutions?
Thank you. And the last one, let's see whether the person, there was one. Okay, I hope this was the last one.
Only men. I see only men. Unfortunately.
Moi aussi, je vais parler en français. Je réponds au nom de l'abbé Aloïs Boutori. Je viens du Burundi.
Je suis l'abbé Aloïs et sorry, I'm Father Alois and I'm from Burundi. Thank you.
Je suis le directeur de projet au niveau de la conférence des évêques catholiques du Burundi.
I am director of the of projects.
Des projets de la conférence des évêques catholiques du Burundi.
Of the Bishop Conference of Burundi.
Et aussi directeur du centre de paix et réconciliation au Burundi.
And also the director of the Center for Conflict Resolution.
Ce n'est pas une question que je vais poser, mais plutôt je voudrais compléter les conférenciers à propos des propositions qu'ils ont données pour sécuriser ou stabiliser l'Afrique.
I would like to complement what has been said so far concerning African stabilization and security.
Et pour moi, pour les compléter, repenser la sécurité en Afrique consistera à repenser aussi à la démocratie et au système électoral en Afrique.
So to rethink African security means to also rethink the democratization in Africa and the election process in Africa.
C'est-à-dire, pour moi, c'est repenser au mode de bonne gouvernance en Afrique.
It means to rethink the way of good governance in Africa.
Je voudrais vous faire un petit témoignage. C'est pas pour me vanter. Moi, j'ai un baccalauréat en philosophie, une licence en théologie, et une maîtrise en management and leadership.
Okay, I would like to give a little recount and without being, what is it,
baccalauréat en philosophie.
He has degrees in philosophy, theology, and management.
Mais au niveau de mon pays, si demain je voudrais me faire élire comme président de la République,
if I wanted to be elected tomorrow in Burundi as president of the Republic,
avec mon cuisinier,
with my cook,
qui a la troisième primaire,
he has 3 years of school.
Comme nous ne sommes pas de la même ethnie,
as we are not from the same ethnic group,
je suis certain que moi j'aurai peut-être 20% et lui aura 80%.
I would receive 20% of the votes while my cook would receive 80% of the vote.
Vous comprenez ce que je veux dire?
I hope you understand what I mean.
La deuxième observation que je voudrais faire pour les compléter, c'est repenser la sécurité en Afrique. C'est aussi lutter contre le néocolonialisme et l'impérialisme en Afrique.
To rethink African security also means to rethink, to fight neocolonialism and imperialism.
Parce que moi, je suis très convaincu qu'il n'y a aucun pays africain qui est indépendant.
There is not one country in Africa which is independent.
Troisième observation qui est la dernière.
The last observation.
Repenser la sécurité en Afrique consistera aussi à conscientiser les jeunes générations africaines pour prendre conscience que l'Afrique appartient à elle-même.
It would also mean to rethink African security, to make aware the young generations that Africa is theirs.
Et je voudrais féliciter les jeunes générations ici
And I would like to congratulate the young generations here.
Ils nous ont montré l'exemple récemment.
They are our recent example.
Let's appreciate the interpreter as well. I was not looking at the speakers, I was looking at you. My French is very, very small, and if you were not there, I would have gotten lost. We have 5 questions, and let's see how it goes. We will invite the speakers to make some responses, and we will begin. Where is the mic? What we'll do is that we'll begin with Professor Mombo. We'll go to Dr. Mbila. There was no question directly to you. Okay.
You can help me.
Okay, wonderful. And then we'll go to Prof before we go to this other side.
Thank you so much for the questions and the observations that you've made. And it is true that we need to look into much more of for me, the boxes that I was talking about. We need to rethink the boxes, we need to analyze the boxes as we look for solutions ourselves. My former speaker had talked about being critical and looking for homegrown solutions. The first question was about women. And I used a Kenyan example, the Kenyan cliche, the tyranny of numbers, positive or negative. I want to say that there is need for more women on the table. That is important. But there is also need. The fact that there'll be more, they'll be seen and they'll be heard. The fact that they'll be there, perhaps they will change the perceptions about peace and security, because they will bring in some of their lived realities and experiences of insecurity. So it is important that women are there. But secondly, is which women? The last speaker talked about education, that he would not be elected, the cook will be elected. And so who goes to the table, and what are the processes of getting people to the table? That is also important. So the numbers are important, but the who and the how they go to the table is important. They don't go to the table to be serving tea, but they go to the table to discuss issues of security. So who are they? What do they know? What context are they come from? And then what are the processes of choosing them? All right? That is also important. Just as we talk about the processes of choosing government leaders, what are the processes of choosing these women? The last question was about the institutions. What I meant with institutions was the church, the school, the mosque, the home. Modernity is not something to try and resist. It is to rethink and make use of modernity. There are good things in modernity, there are bad things in modernity, and that's why rethinking and being critical is important. So both the school, the church, the mosque, the home needs to rethink this modernity, which is there by the phone. And what good does that bring in terms of building cohesion and peace within the home, within the church institution or religious institutions, and within the total society?
Thank you very much. Prof, you want to respond to yours?
So, as always, my friend Lorien had a very interesting question on the threat of these things. And I do not know if everybody knows what are these threats, besides all the possibilities these things have on communication. The system of algorithms can draw something into a black hole where conspiracy theories are getting bigger and bigger. Let me give a simple example. Let's say you hear from a friend that aliens will take over power in Kenya soon. And you just want to know what's that all about. So you try to look at internet to see what's written about that. About taking over the power in Kenya or in Africa by aliens. There are some articles on that. And then that system with algorithms, which is reinforced by artificial intelligence, produces and provides you with more and more articles of that kind. And in that way, you're more or less, and without even knowing, you're drawn into that black hole where you're more and more convinced that that's a reality. Because it's on internet, because there are articles, because. And that's where it starts, where people get turned around and start to believe in these kinds of conspiracy theories. I produced the photos of the assault of the Capitol on January 6th in 21, which was a result of the rejection by former President Trump that he didn't accept the results of the elections. So he claimed, okay, let's march towards the Capitol to get back our victory, because they were convinced. And that system was also reinforced through internet systems, with algorithms, with people who whose work it is to provide false information on several things. There were conspiracy theories on COVID diseases, on more and more. This is a real threat with all the possibilities we have there. To lure people into that black hole, and avoid that there's what I called an open and critical dialogue between people, where they try to look forward to produce, to ask people to use their talents to create an open society towards more solidarity, and it's a new way of dominating people, and more, instead of using our talents, that people are condemned to be, as I called it, be another brick in the wall. And that is confirmed, what Lauriane said as well, by this. This is also an economic system. Let's be honest, companies like Microsoft, like Apple, like TikTok in China, etc., that's a model to gain money. Your identity, your addresses, your email addresses, your TikTok accounts, your WhatsApp accounts, etc., is valuable for advertisements. Have you noticed that when you're looking for, let's say, a printer on internet, the next time you open your mailbox, you get advertisements for, yes, printers. So they know it. And that's, at that time your address, your identity is sold. Okay, let's say for printers it's rather harmless. But when we talk about security, when we talk about democracy, when we talk about the results of elections, it becomes dangerous. So that's why I called it a powerful, but also a dangerous weapon, that when it falls in hands of enterprises which are not controlled, it could be a dangerous issue. It could be a dangerous item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was doing okay until he said that there is a black. Anyway, I'll come to that. We have another question. We have another question.
Yes, thank you, Alfred. Yes, I heard your question, and if I could reframe it, so it was regarding the grievances of citizens, and there is a human security concerns where we have seen government that do not want to address policies, and did African Union, or does African Union have these policies that tackle issues of concerns of the citizen of the member states? Is that correct? Thank you very much. My presentation, maybe it will be shared on diapo number 6. When I talked about promoting new ways of peace building within the Rethinking Africa Security, I said this, in the way of promoting the peace through it was first joint humanitarian actions and environmental, protection, all citizens have a role to play. But what I wanted to postulate here was that many countries, and maybe I'm reading directly from my note, and which I will provide also many answers, many African countries are becoming increasingly unable to deliver security to their citizens. Sometimes, states themselves have become sources of insecurity. This is attributed less to the evolving security threats exasperated by mega trends or geopolitics, we can put it that way, but more to the governance deficit manifested in weak social contract between the leaders and the citizens, and strategic leadership, and this joins what Father was talking about, how do we elect leaders, right? And strategic leadership that are short supply in many African countries. And this, despite a well-articulated security and defense policy of the African Union, which is a call for all member states to do the same. There is a dearth at national security strategies in most African states. So when we talk about policies, they exist. And I recommend you to read the AGA, that is the African Governance Architecture. And at the other side, you have the APSA, Africa Peace and Security Architecture. All these have actually well-articulated policies and how member states should actually implement them. But remember that at the African Union, there is what we call the sovereignty. So all states are sovereign, and they take decisions based on their interests, and then that's where the challenge comes in. And there is no measure to impose any member state to do something except when it comes to the unconstitutional change of a regime on government, because it's clearly written, once there is a coup d'etat, to make it that clear, so the member state exclude itself. So the leader can't attend the summit or can't attend the meetings. But the country can still be there, it is a member state, but until they come back to the normal thing. So at the African Union, read also from the Constitutive Act, that is like the constitution on the continent. Down you have the African Union vision that I have presented. When you go down, you have the 8 priority areas of the Solemn Declaration. Then you have the African aspirations for the Agenda 2063. Then you have the regional economic blocks. That's where actually everything is done. And down you have the member states' national plans. Now, why I'm bringing this, or giving you all this, I'm taking the case of Kenya, for instance. When there is something happening here, the first regional economic community that should address that in the name of the, what we call the subsidiarity approach, it is the East African community. Before the African Union, so the African Union, which actually is the 55 member states, and the commission is in Addis Ababa. So it's not the commission in Addis Ababa that will intervene. No, it is the EAC that have to intervene. And if the matter is related to climate change and other things, it will be IGAD that actually have to address that. So it depends on policies and also the matter that are at stake. So if I take a case of DRC, the first country or the first REC that should address some of the cases, it depends. If it's a political thing, it could be either EAC, DRC joins very late, or ECAS, or SADC. And that's how you will see most of issues depends on a member state due to this subsidiarity. So it is that regional economic bloc that have to address. So if that bloc is weak, then the intervention you understand that it will be also weak. And I end by saying that already in 2015, the same heads of state made it clear in South Africa, they assessed themselves and said this. There are 5 governance challenges for Africa. And the first was the dismissal state of press freedom. So they acknowledged this, the heads of state. Promotion of restrictive law, where you have protests, but still you have countries that are very harsh on people even when they are expressing themselves freely, while the constitutions of each country guarantees the freedom of expression. So, and they made also recommendations, and there is a third one which entrenched leaders and the abuse of term limits. So they are heads of state whom, even when the constitution is clear, is 2 mandates, no, they still want to go for the third one, so they violate themselves intentionally the constitution. And the fourth one was the weak regional human rights mechanism. I have already talked about it. And last was economic competitiveness, where they call for all RECs to strengthen democracy and governance in their development and integration strategies. So from all these, so there is already at the continental level that understanding. But AU, African Union, cannot come to impose anything in a member state. They can only call on an action to respect the policies that they have signed, because these are binding. And that's, if maybe I did not capture all, we can continue later on. And thank you.
Okay. We will have another opportunity. Thank you very much, Patrick. We'll have another opportunity later for a few questions. I know a friend is asking whether they can ask a question, but my time is also up. And remember that we have a very, very tight schedule. So I'm going to give this opportunity later. We'll have another session. This is our second session of question and answer. We'll have another one. So allow me to guide us on what is going to happen now. We are going to take a break. There are those, a conference usually has those that have been invited, and then there are those who come. And it becomes a bit tricky, particularly at a time like this. So we're going to be asking that we proceed on for lunch, and we are going to be using tags, and we are going to be using, I don't know whether we have meal cards. We do. So based on the tags that we have, we are going to be getting meal cards. And because the university is big, we just want to control that, because we have a particular number so that we do not get ourselves into any situation. So in case you just came to attend the conference and to listen, please understand that, so that we are able to manage that and avoid any kind of a crisis. That's number one. Number two, we go straight from lunch. We don't come here. We will go straight into the breakaway sessions. So we have 3 groups, and these are the groups, and this is how we are going to go. So first of all, we have a group that is looking at holistic approach to security, the role of women and marginalized groups. 2 speakers or 2 facilitators, Margaret Super or Super, I'm not sure. Then we also have Karen Kibuchi. Those are going to be led by Elizabeth Kanini. I don't know whether Elizabeth is here. Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. If you could stand, just stand. Yes, thank you very much. Now, that is going to be important. Just listen to what I will say after this. The second group is going to be facilitated by Miss Mary Njoki and Karanja Muraya. I thought I saw Karanja. Thank you very much. And the leader will be Nelson, Dr. Nelson. I haven't seen Nelson, so we will have to get somebody. Okay, that is where Mary Ann, and since I asked the other lady to stand, why don't you stand? That group, thank you very much, is going to be looking at community policing in Kenya, new paradigms in policing. A very, very interesting area as well. Thank you. We will have the third group that is going to be led by Kevin Vundi and Agnes Harao. Are they around? I saw Kevin somewhere. Kevin, yes, that is Kevin. Where is Agnes? Agnes, thank you very much, Agnes. And this group is going to be looking at the next generation leadership, youth as game changers, transition strategies, and they will be led by Canon Scholar Kilu. Here she is, I think you can see her. Now, I do not want to prefect you into where you are going to go. We have two options. One option is we give everybody a number and then you go to a particular place. But that place may not be of interest to you. And therefore, the best thing is to allow you to go to the area that you will be comfortable going to. It is far much easier, and I've seen that works better for workshops, because then if I'm interested in things about the youth, I will go there. If it is women or community policing, I will go to that particular place. But that is going to be at exactly 2:20. So at 2:20, we'll be expecting that you will be able to proceed on. As you go to SPU, or what we call Abigail, guest room, or Abigail restaurant, you will see a newly built building that is written SPU EU, that is a St. Paul's University Enterprise Unit. 2 rooms are going to be there. That is going to be room number 1, that is going to be hosting those who are doing holistic approach to security. And the second one is going to be community policing. Those ones will go to that room. Let me even share with you the particular names of the rooms. Grace has been so gracious. Grace is gracious. She has given me even the names. So holistic approach is going to go to Mount Kenya. And then community policing is going to go to Tana. That is in that particular building. And as we go there, as we go for lunch, you will see that particular building. And the third group is going to go to the CAB, Central Admin building. And there is a particular room on the ground floor, and Scholar knows the place, since she is leading the place. Once we finish our lunch, even as we go, you can ask based on your interest. See those 3. In fact, I want them to come. Kindly come, the 3 of you, the leaders of these 3 groups, Marianne, Scholar, and it wasn't Agnes, it was Elizabeth. Come over. I just want people that may want to know where to go after this at exactly 2:20. Be found there, and you will have exactly 1 hour. So from 2:20 to 3:20, you will be allowed to continue with your engagement, and after that, we will reassemble here. All of us will come back here so that we can receive the final reports, and after that, we will start winding up so that we finish in good time. We have caught up with time, so we're not doing very badly, but during lunch, please ensure that you expedite that so that we do not have any challenges. Unless you have a question, and I want to direct all our questions now to these 3, not right now, but as we exit. But I would like to request all of us to stand. Everybody, stand wherever you are. My other life, I'm also a pastor, so once in a while I tell people, greet your neighbor. You know, people just came to this conference and you never knew who was your neighbor. Kindly turn to your neighbor and tell them, Karibu. Yes, you see now, that was very important. Having said that, I would like us now to have a prayer so that when we proceed on to have our lunch, it is going to be a straightforward kind of a thing. Let me invite Elizabeth. Are you able to pray with us? Okay, please. Elizabeth, if you could pray with us for lunch, please.
Let us all pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for being with us this morning up to this time. We thank you for what you have shared and for what we are still going to share. As we break to share our meal, we pray that you may bless it and let it give us energy to continue serving you, especially in this field of finding ways to enable your people live in humane way in this society. And we ask you all this through Christ our Lord.
Thank you very much. If you will allow our speaker